Hello everybody. I'm going to make a short tutorial about how to get glass texture into Unreal. I'm working with one of my students' files, and they spend a lot of time in the material editor working towards getting some glass to work, and it looks awesome in the viewport here. The problem is when you export this FBX file out, the glass doesn't obviously maintain its transparency because Blender has its own way of doing things internal to the application. So this person, and I'm looking at their different material slots here, they built out a procedurally generated wood texture, and they also created this glass texture for the tabletop. And I can see from this parameter here on the BSDF shader that they've simply changed the transmission from 0 to 1. Now that is internal to Blender and will help the renderers. In this case, we're looking at it using Eevee. It will help the renderers to know how to treat that surface to make that texture translucent. But that's not something that you can just simply export out into an FBX file. So we have to recreate that type of generated texture over in Unreal. Now while I'm at it, I want to point out, when I'm looking at this wood material, I'm seeing that the nodes that they have chosen, and this is a good solution, they've decided to use the generator of noise and Voronoi and have pumped this generated texture into the metallic channel. Now this might not be the solution that I would go for because metallic is used to define whether or not a surface is metallic or not, or how metallic is that surface. Historically, Blender would only allow metal to be 0 or 1, on or off. But in recent versions, they're allowing it to be a varying degrees of metal, which creates some interesting looks inside of the software, but isn't necessarily something that's going to translate well when we export this out for Unreal. So what I'm going to strongly suggest for anyone looking to create a texture, and I'll show you all a very, very powerful trick. This can be done as well in Maya, but you would need to spend a little bit more time wiring it up. I'm even going to take the displacement map off this as well. And I'm just going to push these nodes down like so. So we're looking at the table. The base color is just simply brown. Now I've gone over to Texturescom, and I have found on this website, by searching high and low, some wood textures that are really beautiful. And I grabbed this one here called Rough Wood. And down below you can see that there are an albedo map, which is your base color. The normal maps, roughness is there, even the height map, if you wanted to bring that in to actually distort your geometry, you can bring that in as well. But the normal map is going to do just great for us. So all I've done is downloaded the 3 that I'm looking for to use in Unreal, which is my albedo map, my normal map, and my roughness. And what's really awesome about Texturescom, their naming convention is going to be helpful here in a minute when we bring it into Blender. So I'm going to actually just get rid of the name Texturescom because I'm going to eventually use this in my Unreal program as well, my Unreal project. So just get rid of that. So wood rough 1K. As long as we've got these names, albedo, which is base color, normal, and roughness, then Blender is going to do something very magical for us here in a second. Now these are image maps. The approach this student was taking earlier was to use procedurally generated textures, which is great, but we would have to do something called baking the material. And baking it would actually render the procedurally generated material out into a bitmap that then we would put back onto the surface as a base color, which is another tutorial that I want to do. But for now, what I want to make sure I have installed in my preferences under add-ons here is NodeWrangler. Now I'm going to go the long way. I've got NodeWrangler turned on. I'm just going to tap with clicking down here in the actual node viewer, I'm going to tap the N key and have this shelf fly out of the right side here. And I can see there's a tab for NodeWrangler. And if I don't remember the shortcut keys, I can always pop this open, just highlight the shader that we want to work with. In this case, it's the principled BSDF, which relates to the material slot known as wood material. And I'm going to add a principled setup. Click that. Now highlight the 3 files and click principled texture setup. And Bob is your uncle. It does a wonderful job of grouping the nodes, piping in the texture coordinates and the mapping appropriately, sets up the normals right. And we have to be careful. The color space for our normal map has to be non-color. Same is true with our roughness. It's done a wonderful job of setting that up as non-color. And our base color, which is the brown wood texture, is being pumped into our base color. So I get a good view in Blender as to how this is going to look. Now, I have to be critical. The UVs are not set up properly, but this is not a tutorial about UVs, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Yeah, because I think it'll get the point across. So now, when I head on over to Unreal, and I'm going to bring in this FBX that I've exported, we're going to see that these 2 shaders that were defined, because they were procedurally generated in Blender, they're going to lose their properties. Glass is going to come in probably as white, and the wood material is going to be brown. That takes a minute for the application to do its work. And don't forget, back here, when I hop back to the material slot known as glass, these folks were able to create the transmission, the transparency, by dragging this property here, by changing the transmission to 1. So how do we get that across in Unreal? So I'm going to open up this material known as glass. And I can see it's pumping in this blue, which is fine. I think the base color was actually defined as blue in Blender. I can see down here that there are some properties for this specific shader. And what I need to do is get rid of the param, grab the glass itself, and since I'm highlighting this node, it's going to say underneath material domain, what is the blend mode for this? Well, the blend mode for this is going to not be opaque, but instead translucent. Now it's changed the number of inputs that I have at my disposal here. Actually, what I might do is just go back to where I actually had the param. Change this. That's the blue that the student chose for the glass color. And grabbing this node here, I can now change the blend mode to translucent. It has now changed the number of inputs that I'm allowed to have access to. And what's kind of cool, I can literally take this parameter here, I can paste it and start thinking about what is grayscale, if not a variant from, I'm going to drag this all the way down. So R, G, and B, 1, 1, 1, all the way down to 0, 0, 0, black. So we can literally pump, now that we've got this set to being a translucent material, we can pump this parameter right into opacity. I'm going to take a second for the shader to update. There we go. We can see through that now. And if we look at changing this back up to white, okay, black to white. Not what I was expecting. Instead, let us add in a constant. And I'm going to push this constant into opacity. And it's currently set to 0. But if I typed in 1, it would be completely opaque. If I set it to 0, it would be completely transparent. If I set it to 0.5, then it would be half translucent. I hit save, head on back over to my table, open that up now, and I now have a translucent tabletop. As for the other materials, I'm just going to be messy here and just bring them on in like so. I'm going to open up wood material. I grab these three, just drag them up into my material editor. I'm going to pump that albedo map into my base color. Roughness, I'm going to push that into the roughness channel. And my UV, my normal map into my normal. Press save. And take a gander. And because I'm using image maps, it's going to look fantastic. Now once more, the UVs need work for this model. But in terms of it being a glass table, we're pretty much there. And that will be everything for this tutorial. Oh, and I'll leave it up to the student to figure out how to make that glass shiny.